Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Going Life's Longevity Weekly. This is a show where I bring you all the news and updates from the world of health, wellness and longevity. I'm your host Chris Kerwin, and this week we're going to be talking about Omicron and the story so far, my chat with Dr. George Janssens, a gerontologist from the University of Amsterdam, and the second part of our series, Can We Live Forever? So before that, please don't forget to like and subscribe as it really helps us out. And let's get on with the headlines in brief. A few weeks ago, the government announced that Genomics England, a government-owned company, would receive funding to run a research pilot in the UK that aims to sequence the genomes of between 100 and 200,000 newborn babies. The babies' genomes will also be de-identified and added to the UK's National Genomic Research Library, with the goal of developing new treatments and diagnostics. In a recent study, researchers have developed a vaccine which targets inflammatory senescent cells which build up in the body. Senescent cells are cells which have stopped dividing, triggering some of which to start emitting damaging inflammatory signals, a process which has been proposed as one of the key drivers of the aging process. The development of a vaccine to remove these cells could be an important stepping stone to slowing down the biological aging. Now, firstly, it's been a month since the World Health Organization declared SARS-CoV-2 variant B11529, otherwise known as Omicron, a variant of concern. But what do we know about this virus so far? The Omicron strain has a large number of mutations, 32 of which affect the much talked about spike protein. This is a main target of antibodies generated in response to infections and many of the vaccines. Of these mutations, 15 are located in the receptor binding domain of the spike protein, which is a part of the protein that interacts with the ACE2 receptor on the surface of human cells. Now, this is important because the receptor binding domain is a main target of neutralizing antibodies, which are the antibodies that interfere with the virus's ability to infect cells. Now, the variant also has 3 mutations at what's called the furin cleavage site. This is important for viral entry into the cell and has the ability to affect the infectivity of the virus. Now, is Omicron more contagious than previous variants? As the director of the WHO stated earlier this week, Omicron is spreading at a rate that we've not yet seen with any other previous variant. A study by Imperial College London, which looked at the spread of the Omicron variant, which involved over 200,000 individuals, reported that the proportion of Omicron among all COVID cases was doubling every 2 days up to December the 11th. Based on these results, they estimate that the reproductive number, or R number, of Omicron was above 3 over the period studied. Now, is Omicron less deadly than previous variants? There's been a lot of speculation that infections caused by the Omicron variant might be less severe and less likely to be deadly than previous variants. Well, unfortunately, this is probably wishful thinking. We don't yet have enough data to support the assertion that Omicron is any more or any less deadly than any other variants, and such speculation seemed to have stemmed mainly from a quote by a South African doctor that was taken out of context. Now, does Omicron bypass immunity? Unfortunately, scientists think that there is a good chance that the mutations in Omicron will allow it to bypass existing immunity to a much greater extent than the other variants. However, Pfizer and BioNTech have recently announced from a study into the effectiveness of their vaccine against the Omicron variant, the take-home message is that in people who have had 3 doses of the vaccine, levels of neutralizing antibodies against Omicron are lower than they are against other variants, but they are still 25 times higher than in people who have only had 2 doses, which just goes to show how important it is to go and get your booster. And secondly, earlier this year I was delighted to host Professor George Janssens, a longevity researcher from the University of Amsterdam, who is also the creator of Aging is Beautiful, a website dedicated to the science and philosophy of aging. Now, here's just a short clip of us talking about how wearable tech devices can help predict your biological age. I first wanted to focus on that model, and I believe you called it the Move Age model. So what does it actually predict, and how does it predict it?
The biggest factors involved basically are not surprisingly, maybe your maximum intensity of your accelerometer, and also your variance. So that means the variety of movements that are occurring in the day or in the week for you, because it's based on a 1 week time frame. The more variance you have, the more that was associated to youthful biological age. So max intensity and variance were really the two. We calculated it throughout the day on a minute base. So we can have, just a lot of data still for that. And then that's essentially how the model works.
Our thanks again for Professor Janssens for joining us for that chat. It was really fascinating and well worth going to check out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, thirdly, in our previous episode of Longevity Weekly, we discussed longevity escape velocity and just how exponential growth makes it so hard to predict how medicine and technology progress over time. Now, this week we pondered what possible avenues this innovation may take that will lead humanity to unshackling itself from its own mortality. The first way in which we might reach longevity escape velocity and escape the grips of aging may instead be to identify the damage responsible for aging at the molecular scale and find ways to reverse it until it can be maintained at an acceptable low level. This way, we wouldn't need to fully understand all of the complex processes that are driving the damage. In this instance, we wouldn't have prevented aging any more than bailing water out of a holed boat prevents more water from leaking in. But we will have brought more time before the boat sinks. Now, during this time, we'll be able to develop more and more effective ways of removing the water, until eventually we're removing water at the same rate as it's leaking in. In order for this to work, we would need to target the so-called hallmarks of aging. 9 biological processes which are proposed to be the main drivers of aging. The hope is that by focusing on these hallmarks, instead of waiting until they manifest into cancer, dementia, or any other age-related disease, we'll be able to delay it with just a handful of therapies. An alternative to reversing biological aging is to replace biology with technology and go fully artificial, transferring our consciousness to a more resilient machine form, whether by replacing the neurons in our brain with artificial ones or by uploading ourselves to a data center somewhere. Although this idea does seem a little unnerving, as when do we actually cease being humans, it does boast a lot of benefits. We could then live in a new, younger, cloned body, or an artificial one, enhanced to have special abilities, or even become an entirely virtual entity. It also offers the opportunity to greatly expand human intelligence and the ability to instantly learn new information. This might even be a necessary step in our evolution for humans to remain relevant in a world where artificial intelligence far surpasses natural human intelligence. This might seem like an impossibly futuristic prospect, but remember that technology grows exponentially. Now, whether longevity escape velocity is achieved through biological means, artificial means, or a combination of both, the future is going to look very, very different from the current state of humanity. Now, do we need to proceed with caution? What effect will a massive increase in lifespan have on society? These are just a couple of the questions that we really need to seek answers to. And that is it for another episode of Gowing Life's Longevity Weekly, so I really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you'd like to find out anything more about what I talked about today, I'll leave all the links in the description below. So go and check out the Gowing Life website as well, which has all our recent news and updates from the world of longevity. So thanks again, I hope you have a happy holidays, and I will see you in the new year. Thank you, goodbye.